In a previous video, I visited towns in Frosinone like Alatri, close to Rome, and they were part of some sort of pre-Roman civilization of Latium. Here, close to Naples, in Cumae, there is another very interesting sacred complex. I don't think it's the same as the peoples who built places like Alatri, because there are none of the polygonal stonework features here. But there is something else very sacred and interesting here, in that it is a temple within a cave that is part natural and partially enhanced by the work of the ancients. Cumae was the first Greek or Eboian city built on the Italian mainland, and although it had a very impressive array of temples, there is no doubt that the real feature of importance here is the Sibylline cave, which became part of a very important sanctuary in the Greek and pre-Greek world. Although this is said to be the cave of the Sybil, more likely than not it was part of some of the early cults of the gods of the underworld, or cults related to Mother Earth. The caves and the springs were always considered very sacred, and no doubt the fact that there were fumes from volcanic activity and gases emanating from here would have perhaps contributed to the trance state, or the experience of having a deeper, more profound connection with some of the natural elements and phenomena. I'm in the Grotto of the Sybil. In a way, it reminds me a little bit of some of the Etruscan ruins closer to Rome, or north of Rome. But here we're about 200 kilometers south, or 100 kilometers south of Circeo. And the trapezoidal structure is what reminds me of the Etruscan structures. There's no real archaeological explanation as to when or how this was built, or why it was built, but it is built under the Acropolis. Behind me is the Temple of Apollo, which is right above the caves of the Sybil. And of course, Apollo is associated with oracles, such as in the case, famously, of Delphi. And Virgil mentions that Daedalus, the father of Icarus, brought the wings that he used to escape Minos and dedicated them to Apollo here. So there's a very strong mythological connection between ancient Greece and this part of the world. This is no doubt the inner sanctum of this sanctuary, and there are very interesting acoustic effects. One can actually hear people right on the other side of the tunnel here in this space. So I'm sure the presence of a booming voice from the gods via the Sybil would have had a very powerful effect on the people visiting this sanctuary. There is an interesting pattern of three-way pools or chambers. We have the so-called, in my opinion, pool section in the middle of this passage. Then at the end here we have three sections, and then within one side, which goes into the mountain, we have another threefold chamber, perhaps associated with the three different worlds of the underworld, the middle world, or the celestial world, as in shamanism, or perhaps the mother, the father, and the child, the offspring. if in later years these caves were associated with the Sibylline oracles, maybe in earlier years, as was always the case, the cave represents birth, going into the body of the Mother Earth, going into and being reborn into the world of the ancestors, perhaps, and in so doing being initiated into the mysteries of death and inevitably rebirth. So apart from an oracle, I do believe that this was some form of place of initiation into the mysteries, a place of healing, which inevitably was an integral part of rebirth, the rebirth process. And I find it so fascinating that this rebirth, this mystery initiation, was such an important part of the spirituality of the ancients. The symbolism of that continued with Christianity, with Christ representing the rebirth of the soul, or of the followers of Christ being reborn in Christ. But that sense of redemption and salvation that rebirth brings is such an important spiritual motif, and something that we all need to remember, especially in this modern time, that there is the possibility of redemption, there is the possibility of becoming someone new. We're not limited to our old ego ways, we're not limited to our personality. We can be reborn through spirit in order to explore new and more exalted aspects of ourself. And just as Cumae was a designated sanctuary for healing and prophecy, Machu Picchu in Peru is a very similar sacred site for healing, for connection to the divine, especially for connection to Pachamama, Mother Earth. These sanctuaries, which were so important to the ancients, were places where we could go away from mundane life in order to explore other identities and what else was possible for us as human beings to be reborn into our true and cosmic self.
Madre tierra, danos